Santana. Ron, are you okay?
The man put it back, sir.
Calm down. Breathe, Ron. Breathe.
The man that's from the motorcycle.
What did the bad man do,
The
Ron?
motorcycle on the bridge. I hit him with a burrito.
Ron.
He took him with his foot, and he kicked him. That's what he did.
Someone punted him?
No, wait, let me say something. Let me say something.
What? I didn't understand a one word you said. Ron, are you okay? Ron. Ron, where are you?
I'm in a glass case of emotion.
All right, welcome back to another week of Muskies on Tap. I'm your host, Gus Manti, and right now I'm sitting right next to one of the other co-hosts, Max Manti. He's up north right now, and the fishing has been very, very good. I'll just kind of dive right into that right away. It's the bite's been hot. I mean, we've been catching good amounts of fish, but we've also been losing high numbers, and that's going to be a talking point tonight. We're going to have a few other quick hitters on what we've been seeing, probably what to expect. There's going to be some warm weather coming up, and then we're going to polish off with some Q&A. So before we get going a little bit further, I will introduce the other co-host tonight, Max Manti, who's sitting right next to me. How are you doing tonight, Max?
I'm doing all right. A little down bad, but glad to be back up in the North Woods. I'll explain, I guess, a little later maybe why I'm down bad, but has something to do with missing a few fish today, a few big bites this weekend, which is always tough. So that'll be one of our talking points this podcast. But other than that, yeah, doing well tonight. Excited to be here. Excited to talk to Brian. Just a little sidebar here on the golf side of things. His man crush, Rory McIlroy, once again comes up short at the British Open. Excuse me, the Open this past weekend. Would love to hear his thoughts on that real quick. But I'm going to kick it over to him right now. Brian, good to see your face. I know that you are battling a current moving situation right now. And, you know, in typical Brian fashion, the planning might not have been completely flushed out. So it sounds like you were able to buy some time. You had a good weekend down in Green Bay, but give me your thoughts right now on the Rory McIlroy situation and how you're doing.
What's going on, guys? I'm doing pretty damn good tonight. On the musky fishing front, I didn't really fish this weekend. I did get out on a kayak on the Fox River on Saturday and pitched a little number 5 Meps around. And the water clarity out there is about 3 inches. It's pea soup, and didn't see a thing. So that's that on my front this weekend. But in terms of the golf, another underwhelming week on the greens for Rory. It's hard to watch anymore. I think I have less confidence in him when he stands over a 10-footer. And yeah, I mean, pretty boring tournament. Probably the worst major of the year, thanks to B Harmony. Guy was lights out. He had an out-of-body experience this week, and he held on to the lead. It takes some guts, some stones, and he got it done. So tip of the cap to him. But man, did that suck to watch.
All right, well, let's get back into the musky talk. I guess before that, being Muskies on Tap, we've been kind of lackluster lately on kind of divulging on what we've been drinking. Papa Manti, Gus and I's dad, mixed up his world famous watermelon jalapeno margs tonight. Got a few of those in the system, so things are going to be free flowing for Gus and I tonight. Polishing up with a nice amber beer. Brian, you drinking anything tonight?
I had a couple over dinner tonight. Went down to the local tavern and had me a Kona Blue Wave or Big Wave, and a Spotted Cow. So those
Wow.
are tasty.
Gus, what are you sipping on over there?
I got a Mexican honey light lager. Our buddy Parker, I think, bought these for the Musky Bender weekend, and there's a few left over, and I'm actually kind of enjoying it. It's got a
You
good
sound
little
shocked, Gus. Why are you shocked?
um I don't know, sometimes like honey would throw me off and you don't really taste that. It's pretty much just like any light lager with maybe an additional flavor. I don't know. I'm horrible at this taste
Now,
testing thing.
is that an import?
All right, Brad. Well, it's Indeed Brewing Company. If anybody knows, it says,
Okay.
I don't know, Brian. It's product of the USA. What do you think about that?
Yeah, not an import then, I don't think.
No, I don't believe I can see on here at all, but no, solid brew. Will recommend.
So yeah, tonight I think we're just gonna riff over a few different topics. Like Gus said, we do have some good Q&A that came in this week, so we'll touch on those. Figure those always go a little bit longer than we typically think that they will. But I think the main objectives chat about here this podcast, it'll be a little bit different. We got a few guests hopefully coming here in the near future. In the meantime, you're just stuck with us three, so apologies to all of you. But main topics tonight are going to be the conversation around losing big fish, how to deal with it, the kind of ups and downs of musky fishing. Second, we'll be kind of talking about patterning. As Gus kind of alluded to, the bite has been really good, but at the same time, it's been a little bit tricky. Each day, it feels like it shifts a little bit one way or another. So we're going to kind of touch on, at least get Gus's opinion from the guide point of view on, how long is too long to stick by a pattern that was working the previous day and then kind of shuts down the next day, and how to figure out what the fish want to actually eat on that given day. And then the last topic we're probably going to touch on a little bit is I think moon phases. Moon phases have been very crucial this year as far as the bite windows go. We were talking a lot about just moon in general on the boat today. Gus and I were able to get out and fish with Clayton Spees, who was a guest on a previous episode, and our other buddy Nick Amros out of Eagle River as well. So we were running 4 deep in the boat today. It was a lot of fun. We moved a lot of big fish, and yours truly had a few heartbreakers. So we'll get into all that, but I want to start out with the big fish. I guess I should say losing the big fish conversation. It's all happened to us before. I guess I'll ask you, Brian, if you're out and obviously the goal anytime you go out to musky fish is just to catch a muskie, right? But the ultimate goal is to continue to improve on your personal best or whatever. A guy that just bagged a very large fish last week, and I'm sure you're still riding the high. I know you're kind of peacocking around lately, especially on the pod and in the group text and whatnot, but you've had your fair share of heartbreaks. What are your typical reactions after you lose a big fish? How do you deal with it? What goes through your head?
That's a good question. I didn't know we were going to do a therapy session today, but I'll try my best to give some advice here on this front.
I need one.
I've lost a few big fish. 2 of them are still picture perfect in my mind. One of them was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And it was later in the day on Sunday, and kind of checked out mentally for the weekend. Had already caught 2 good fish that weekend, and just making mindless casts up on the shore. And I might have brought my bait in. I think I was using a white swimming dog. I might have brought it, about 5 feet out from the boat, and kind of did the old pull it out of the water situation. And there was a big old fat blimp behind it. And who knows how big it was. I mean, at the time, it was the biggest fish I'd ever seen. So I don't know. I'm going to guess around that 4-footer mark. But like for me, coping with that one, I was just more like, I was so clocked out that like I felt like I didn't even deserve to catch that. And then I still have the picture of the fish in my mind. So it's clearly left its mark on me. But yeah, I guess in that case, let's leave the baits in the water until you at least do one figure eight. And
We should say that that wasn't a fish that was just going to follow. It did attempt to almost literally come out of the water to eat a swimming dog 2 feet in the air.
no, that did not happen. That fish had nothing,
Yes,
didn't
yes, it
want anything to
did.
do with my bait.
I was
Um,
standing right there. That was a big fish.
Yeah, so I mean, it happens, everybody. You just got to stick to your fundamentals. Even when the going gets tough, they're going to come out of nowhere. And my next example of that was last year. Um, I think this was an opener, if I remember right. But we were on a local lake, and all we caught all day was like 40 pike. All the little 17-inch pike missiles were going crazy, and didn't see a single muskie for I don't know how long, 20 hours. And I I decided to grab out like a walleye rod, and I threw on a was like a single blade number 6 or something musky killer.
Yeah, I think it was what are they, Musky Killer #5 Meps.
Yeah, and black and orange looked great, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna have some fun with these pike because the musky thing feels far fetched at this point. And
Just trying to feel something.
yeah, just trying to feel some, just trying to lift the spirits, trying to stay engaged. And what happened then, probably 20 minutes after I grabbed this rod, is I'm bomb a cast out, and I'm reeling it in really fast because I don't feel the blade spinning, and I'm trying to get them to spin, they won't, so I'm kind of zipping it in, and I pull it kind of in like an L shape and then pick it up out of the water next to the boat. And this giant muskie turns and starts swimming straight away from the boat. And we just saw the whole side of the fish. And it looked like it was a foot tall. It was a giant, and it followed straight in on a kinked out bucktail. So that one was tough to see. It got the heart going for sure. I don't know if I would have even been able to land that fish on the medium light rod. That would have been a great story in itself. But another one where, even if you have a clump of weeds or your bait's not working, just finish the cast, finish the figure eight, because you never know what a stupid muskie's thinking looking at that thing.
Yeah, I know the clump of weed things is hard to get behind, and I think it's something that's hard to get through some people's minds, especially people that are new into musky fishing. I know even just today, I don't want to talk too much about your fish, just the fish that Max had up today, not any ones that hit. They could have hit. We were ripping through weeds, but they're following the baits hard with weeds on the baits. So it's always good to just figure eight every single time. It's always good to form good habits, really. I know you're talking about when you kind of just get down bad, and that's usually when something bad happens because you start doing lackluster figure eights, and that's just where it gets really tough. And that's where you get go back to the fundamentals and get the good figure eights going. But I'm gonna switch the mic over to Max and see, well, kind of really ask how he deals with losing fish, because it's been all too recent, unfortunately, for kind of both of us. Really, the boat has been going through difficult times. The bite has been great. Boating some of the large fish has just been quite difficult. So how do you get through that, Max?
Yeah. Recency is very true on this one. Like I was saying before, Gus and I got out with Clay and Nick today, and big fish were on the move. Finally moved that mega giant today, which was a lot of fun to see. Followed in a regular size Medusa, and just God, that got me shaken. Seeing a fish of that size, I don't want to put a number on it, but definitely the biggest fish I've seen this year. And I was fairly early on in the day, and I was the only one at the time throwing kind of the more magnum size rubber baits. Granted, this was just a regular Medusa, but ended up throwing a mag dog, and I'll get into that. But that was a pretty cool fish to move. We went back on it later on during the day, during the major, and weren't able to find it again. But yes, today was a very, very tough day. I had 3 bites on rubber. All 3 were able to shake off, including The one at the end of the day, with about 10 minutes before we were going to take out, way out in the cast, made a bomb cast with a mag dog and was popping it very quickly through the weeds. And that very familiar feeling of when your bait just stops. You feel like you pretty much got snagged onto a log or something. And, you're out in 10, 12 feet of water. There's no logs and your bait's 3-4 feet down. And felt the weight, knew it was of just a very, very good fish. Felt a few head shakes and it popped off. And it's tough because you're out there just trying to enjoy yourself. And then, that happens and we had to take out, we had to get back and you're just like leaving the boat launch feeling nauseous. But it's something that everybody goes through in their musky career. And it's part of the game. So there's really no words of wisdom more so than just, hey, I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
Hey, it gets better.
It gets better. The losses, the big losses make the ones that you actually can get to hit the bag that much sweeter. And I think it makes like those big fish that you're able to actually catch like that much more rewarding, because I think when you're losing big fish, you realize just how much more difficult they are to catch. Like, at least in this northern Wisconsin, area, it's you don't come across upper 40s like you do in Minnesota and Canada and other parts of the United States. And for whatever reason, we really cherish those, opportunities to catch those big fish. So when you lose them, it stings a lot because you just don't know exactly when that next opportunity is going to come around. So I guess my answer parlays a little bit off of Brian's. It's like, you just got to always stay ready because you really just never know. But yeah, like Gus said, it's been a tough, about 10-day stretch with losing some big fish. Granted, we've had big fish hit the net and maybe that's just the odds, right? You say you hook 5 big fish, maybe you only net 1 or 2 of them. So as I've said on the Instagram thing, like hashtag, that's just the way she goes, because it's truly just the way she goes. I know Gus has had a few guide trips lately and they've been able to put some muskies in the boat, but he's also had clients lose fish. So I guess I'd like to hear from Gus now, because
I want to add
Oh yeah, go ahead.
one
Go ahead.
quick thing here that I forgot to add, because I think I lost a pretty big fish last Sunday. I'm sure most of you listeners already do this, but triple check if your hooks are sharp, because I threw on a new bait, casted it out, and I mean, you couldn't have pierced your own skin if you tried to hammer it into you. This thing was super dull, so
Oh, dude,
I lost that fish. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's a great point about being like meticulous on the things you're doing. I'm talking about how you only get so many opportunities, especially in northern Wisconsin, at these big fish, and it's like you have to prepare, whether it's in your retrieve or in your setup, whether you're checking your line, your leaders, your hooks, making sure they're sharp. Like, everything has to be ready for when that actual moment happens. You're talking about how you had dull hooks because you changed baits and we were out just kind of having fun fishing fast and furious, and you just throw on a new lure, whatever, maybe this thing will work, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get hit by a big fish and it pops off and you're like, yeah, well shit, my hook was super dull. Today for me, it was at the end of the day and I started working the rubber a little bit differently and I got a little bit lazy with kind of where my rod tip was. And that fish, when it hit, I was in a really bad position to set. If I would have been locked in, and really been focusing on where, my rod tip was in relation to where the line was and where the relation to where my bait was, I most likely would have been able to get a much better set into that fish. But I was I was tired. My back was hurting. My shoulder hurt. My wrist hurt. And now we've been fishing for multiple hours on end. And finally that pop comes. And of course it comes when I'm, I just had popped it way up into the right. And all of a sudden my rod loads and it's just like, I don't even know how I can set this fish. So yeah, it's tough. And like, I was listening to Clay and Gus talk to me about, okay, if you're fishing rubber, like you want to keep your, rod, I guess I'll let Gus talk about that, but they were giving me some good pointers and it's just like, man, it's true. Like you really do always have to be ready for when that potential fish hits, because, those small details can kind of make or break if the fish gets off or whatever.
Yeah,
but,
and the other thing you said about checking your leader and checking your line, making sure it's not frayed or anything, going off of that, happened to our buddy Parker, and I feel like this is overlooked, and a lot of people just don't do this very often. But to check each of your eyelids on your rod, because if those get slightly chipped and there's like a little groove in it, I mean, any tension that gets on your line, it might cut right through it, and you might lose it on a fish. So just go back to all the little things to check over just to prevent failure once you do hook into a giant.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, I remember that when we were fishing them the other night. I mean, the devil's in the details with musky fishing. I mean, you hear those stories of people out there and they catch 48, inch musky on a bass whatever rod and 10-pound test, but most of the time that's not going to work out. You got to have everything ready to go. Well, I guess with all that said, though, I do want to turn it over to Gus now because he recently has had a few heartbreaks, not only himself, but a few with clients. They have been able to boat some fish, but I kind of want to hear from a guy who's on the water a lot more, fishing a lot more, kind of where his mental state is, when he misses a big fish. Because when he's with clients, most of the time, he's not fishing as much as when he just fishes with us. So, even though he's on the water a lot, he's not actually getting that like bait. Even when he fishes with clients, you're maybe third in line, right? Or you're
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm third in line if they even want me to fish with them, and if I do, it's I don't know, a fraction
you're passing the rod off.
fraction of the time, and the rod's getting handed off no matter what the client says.
Yeah.
Because they're paying me, and I'm not catching fish in front of clients. That's just kind of a guideline I started on my own right away, and I'm just gonna kind of stick behind that. So
Well, yeah, I want to get your thoughts now because you did have your own heartbreak on Sunday, and you're a guy that's caught a lot of big fish in your life, and I thought you played that fish out perfectly. But now looking back at the film, and another thing too is filming yourself and your musky fish is kind of goofy as it feels like sometimes. Man, can you learn a lot about different things you can do the next time around? So I'll turn it over to you, Gus.
so you guys just made a lot of incredibly good points on how to handle fish loss, a couple of really good pointers on just like what to do in your meantime, make sure your line's good, blah blah blah. All that stuff is really good. And yeah, heartbreaks have been happening recently, and I don't want to harp on those too often because I'm not just going to sit here like, okay, this day went out, yep, lost that fish, that sucked, blah blah, that. I'd like to kind of dive in maybe to some fundamentals, maybe breaking down a few fish that have been lost by myself or clients, and just kind of talk through some things that you guys as an angler can just kind of better yourself and go forward with, just hoping that you guys out there lose less fish as well. And hopefully that this helps. And like Max said, just looking at the game film of us fishing on the GoPros, that's been super helpful, because I'll start right away with the heartbreak on Sunday of this past week. I mean, it was a good solid, pretty much mid-40s fish. Hit a bucktail way out in the cast, pretty much what everybody dreams of. You got a high percentage hookup bait. All you got to do is straight retrieve it, and a really big fish smashes it. So I went back through the film and I saw two key things that I really screwed up on. I thought I had a good set, and I thought I played the fish right. Looking back at the film, neither of those things even happened. I wouldn't say screaming in the bucktail, but I was reeling it in pretty quick. And in the retrieve, I like to kind of pulse the bucktail quite a bit, or at least like with the rod tip, or maybe like speed it up with the handle. And in this case, I did something dumb, and instead of just like pulsing it down really quick with the rod and keeping the rod pointed at the bait, I decided to kind of do like a half set to the side to kind of like pump the bucktail. So my rod tip's already out to the side in a horrible set position right after I gave that fish a triggering time to eat. So I pumped the bucktail to the right, and that's when the fish ate. So my rod was already in horrible position. I got a hook set that I thought was good, ended up not being good. So from there, that was kind of like, point number one on something to kind of not do when bucktail fishing, or really most of the lures that you use, is to never, any rubber or anything, just not having your rod tip out to your side or up, and giving yourself zero space to pretty much set the hook. Max got 1 point quick.
Well, real quick, what is a good setting position? Because we've been talking about that a lot. So in your words, what would that be?
My words, I would just say, as long as that rod tip is pointed in the direction of where the bait is, you always have all the space in the world to go all the way up with it, all the way to the side with it. If you're a side setter, up into the corner, depending on if you're lefty or righty, I'm not going to say sides because, you might be a lefty or righty or something like that. But yeah, that's what I would say, is just kind of keeping it pointed right at it. Because if you're, even just like your body position too, I was kind of talking through that a little bit with a client recently, is they're kind of asking me, like, how can I set up my body for the figure eight? And I'm like, well, it's always good to kind of have it set up for setting the hook too in the cast, and not being like too square. You kind of almost want to line up, because you have your strong side and your weak side. So if you're reeling with your right hand, holding the rod with your left, which is, I think, the primary of what most people do, is that if you set the hook to your left, which would be away from your body, you got no hook setting power. You want to be setting to your right. So you almost want to like prepare your hips. I don't know. I guess you could say get maybe your left foot forward a little bit to kind of prepare any sort of hook set to your right. I don't know. I think that's probably two key things to kind of work on, is just like making sure that your body's set so that you can have like a good hook set always to your strong side, and use your hips, not just your arms, but almost just drive it with your hips as well. That's an important thing for every sport, like the ones that we've played, like golf and hockey. Hips is everything on power. So that's how you really get the power on the hook set. You just because you have an X heavy 9-foot rod and a high speed gear reel doesn't mean you're going to get the strongest hook set. But anyways, back to that one lost fish on the second part of the fundamentals, when I said, all right, bad hook set from the start, went to go play the fish out, and I kind of could tell it was a big fish. It was swimming at me the whole time, which is what big fish like to do once you set the hook, which is always a bummer and really hard to, reel up on them. I started to walk the fish, which is something that I do like to do on very large fish, just because they can kind of dog you and take you where they want, which is something you kind of want to do, because you cannot force those big fish around too much. You will bend out hooks, you'll lock drags, all that nasty stuff. And all I did is actually just get too far ahead of the fish, where my rod tip and everything, I was moving around the trolling motor, and I was already pointed, basically pulling the bait out of the fish's mouth. And that's exactly what happened. It ended up just shaking its head and bait came flying out. The whole bucktail was inhaled into its mouth, and it spit it out like a dog chew toy. So that is where I probably should have been horsing it back to the left, or at least getting some rod pressure not in the direction of where that fish's mouth was facing. And that's something I saw immediately watching the film, looking back, that I was just walking that fish way too fast up to the front, following it along way too quickly. And that is something that I will definitely work on and try and coach people through, and everything to just kind of hope for way less fish losses and better playing of the fish boat side, because that can be really difficult. And I think that's actually where the majority of fish kind of have been lost. There's a few that have been getting smashed by rubber out in the cast, and that's it kind of just goes back to rod positioning and preparing for a hook set at any moment, which is tough after hour 6 of something like that through a day. But another one too is if you hook a fish out in the cast and you're reeling it in and keeping good tension and all that stuff, but as soon as it starts getting to the boat, big or small fish, if you got that rod tip above your waist and higher, there's a good shot that fish is going right to the surface and either jumping or thrashing on the surface. And if you have too much tension there, it's already bad that it's going to be jumping, like with the rod tip high, you're going to just pull the hooks right out of its mouth. It's going to be shaking and twirling so much that it's going to create just so much torque that it's inevitably going to pull the hooks out. And that is pretty much the biggest way on how fish have been lost as when they are coming to the boat, for all the ones that have been eating well out in the cast, which those have been heartbreaks. But other than that, I don't know what else to really talk about there other than just I hope you can use these fundamental tricks to not have the heartbreaks at all. I think that's all I got there.
Yeah, no, I think that's all. Those are all really good good advice, I think, all around. And hopefully, implement some of those tips Gus has talked about next time you hook into your, hopeful PB. Just want to quickly transition here to kind of keep things moving along, and want to talk about patterning because I think at this point in time of the year, fish are setting up in pretty predictable spots. So you have a good feel every time you go on the lake on probably where those fish are. Maybe we can get a little bit into that, but you know where the fish are, but now the second piece of the equation comes up is what do they want to eat and when? and those are two pretty big questions to try to figure out, right? And so we were talking about this on the boat today, and I'm with 3 other anglers, 2 of whom are pretty great guides in my opinion, Clay and Gus, and Nick, who I don't know if he's ever guided, but he could guide. I mean, he fishes more than most people I know, and he's a great angler. So, we're with 4 guys that really were putting the pedal down and fishing hard today. We went to the same lake Gus and I went to on Saturday because we did feel like we're moving some good fish and seeing things we liked. But on Saturday, it felt like the only thing those fish wanted to eat were blades, and blades that were moving fast, and big blades. And that's a pretty, niche bite, right? When that's happening, it feels like that's the only thing that can happen. Sorry, our cat is going crazy right now. It's hilarious. Climbing up. But when that's happening, it feels like that's the only thing they want, big blades, fast. Now, we go to this lake today, Sunday, and we had 4 people fishing. So obviously our kind of strategy was, okay, they were eating big blades yesterday, but we don't want to just run 4, double 10s or 4 staggers, so somebody's got to throw something a little bit different. So I threw on a regular Medusa and was snapping that around, and I stuck with big rubber the rest of the day. And not because I was, doing anything special, but the fish today only wanted big rubber. All they wanted. I threw a Mag Dog. I threw a regular Medusa. That was 98% of our action came on those 2 baits out of all 4 of us fishing vast weed beds.
So Max, let me ask you this real quick. So for
Sure.
like people who are listening who might just go out by themselves, they got one guy on the boat, it's just them. How can they more quickly develop a pattern, right? Because like last weekend, I mean, we had 5 guys. You guys had 4 out there today. You can have 2 people throwing blades, 2 people throwing rubber, and kind of more quickly develop a pattern. But if you just have one guy out there, I guess in peak summer, I would say start with blades and give it a couple hours and maybe get a follow and you'll kind of get the hint. But I mean, what would you say?
Well, I think that's the question. I almost just want to ask Gus on what he feels that timing is. I mean, and truth be told, I was honestly going to probably ask you as our resident bait switcher, pattern finder, a guy that changes baits every single 17 minutes, even after he has a follow. I don't know that. I don't know that answer.
Yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily a right answer. I mean, again, it's musky fishing. A lot of it comes down to luck, right base, right time, right place. But I seem to just go with my gut. And if I've been fishing for an hour or whatever, and I haven't seen a fish on blades or on a straight retrieve, or I have seen a fish and it's super lethargic, coming in way behind the bait, slow, maybe gets 20 feet from the boat and turns around. That's probably my hint to switch to something, pull pause, whether it's a diving rise, suic, or pulling, snapping rubber. But yeah, I mean, if you don't get a follow, it's kind of hard to judge. And then you just that's if we don't have a follow for a while, that's when I start firing through baits and I'm going blades, crank, rubber, top water, get the kitchen sink out and show it to them.
Well, here's something interesting about today. So I was throwing that regular, it was a regular shallow Medusa. And so the hang on it was pretty crazy. I mean, we were fishing, sub 10 feet, that like 10 to 7 foot kind of edge. And, mostly like I was saying, weedish bays. And the shallow Medusa had so much hang on it that I almost felt like it was moving too slow. I was getting fish to move, but I wasn't converting it into any sort of bites. I mean, I had a fish attempt to eat early on in the day, and then it came into the 8. It followed around, I think, 5 times, and it just felt like the bait was almost too slow. It was continually losing interest. The slower I went, I tried to speed it up, it would fire up, and then, kind of, whatever. So I switched to a mag dog, and was, working the absolute ever living shit out of this bait through the weeds. Just popping it like as fast as I possibly could. And that's when I got the bites today. The two big bites. The first one that almost literally took me over the boat. I mean, I'm sure we'll watch that film back later, but it moved my feet.
I felt from the back, I felt the boat shake. I mean, usually you feel when somebody sets the hook up front, and I look, that one was like, yeah, he went hopped up and right back down. I mean, shook the boat.
And then that second one too. I mean, that was working that mag dog. So it was almost like, okay, we found out that they wanted to eat big rubber, but it wasn't just big rubber. It was how I was working it. In order to convert we finally found what bait they wanted, but in order to convert it into bites, needed to work it a certain way. And that was a very exhausting way to work the bait. I mean, I am dead right now. Like literally my shoulder is going to fall off. But that seemed to be the only way to trigger strikes. I mean, Gus and Clay and Nick, for that matter, I mean, most of them were throwing bucktails a lot of the day. They started to switch to rubber, later on, and we didn't want to run four rubber baits either. We kept thinking that a bucktail bite was going to happen, which it never did. But it was truly, the only way to get something to eat was like working it as aggressively as possible. But I think the overall greater question here is, if a pattern was working for you, say you have a 2-day trip on a weekend, Saturday, Sunday. If a pattern was working for you, Gus, on Saturday really well, you guys caught fish, you were moving fish. You go out, go to the same lake or even maybe a different lake on Sunday, and you start with that same process. Say they were eating blades on Saturday, and you fish for the first however long. How long are you giving that with blades the next day until you decide to switch? Is it a moon phase that you have to go through? Is it a bite window? Say you have, a 2 to 3 person boat that day.
So blades hot the day before, you said?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's a good example of literally yesterday and today. 100%, if blades are hot the day before, probably going to stick with somebody having blades for sure. Probably the same blades that had the action the day before. The other thing that I would look at, though, before going any further is if the weather changed in just that one day. Because if it's the same as the day before, 100% stick to the same blade, same speed. But something that I saw that happened between Saturday and Sunday, which the highs were actually very similar, but Saturday there was a shit ton of storms that rolled through, kind of dropped the overnight temps, and then Sunday became still warm, but it was windy, more windy, switched to the north and brought fewer clouds, so it was sunnier. And I feel like that was like a slight post frontal, but not a cold front. So that must have shut the blades off like none other. I mean, enough to make us really confused on why we didn't even move a single fish on blades. And we fished for a while, and we always had pretty much we're rolling with 2 blades out like the entire time until the very end when we realized like, oh, they only want big rubber. How long? That's kind of a question that has been answered differently by everyone after listening to, some of the greats out there and other podcasts, talking to some people personally on how long they stick with the, baits the next day that were hot the day before. I mean, some things just boil down to what you're confident in. I mean, sometimes that's really all it ever boils down to, but it's hard to be confident in a bucktail today, even if I was using, say, only the 2 bucktails that I have the most confidence in, and I go 7 hours without moving a fish. Because if I was fishing solo today and I was like, oh, they're hot on bucktails, they were yesterday, I wouldn't have seen a single fish. Whereas if not for, Max and snapping rubber, or somebody choosing to snap rubber or something different, we would have never realized that, like, that's what they wanted. And I would say, let's just say you go out in the morning and you have a moon window right away. Say it's a major 2-hour period. Probably fish are going to bite. It's somewhat close to sunrise. You stick with what was happening yesterday and you go back to that same area and you drift it at one depth and then say another depth right there, and you don't move a single fish. That's an easy indicator on using different baits, because usually from that day before, especially now in summer, I haven't really seen or experienced any great migrations of fish to different areas. We are pretty much just finding them loaded in the weeds on the lakes that I've been fishing. And actually, what has been kind of happening is I've been doing a lot of exploring this year, and it's kind of honed in more. We're doing a little less exploring, but the lakes that we are going to, just kind of fishing the crap out of them in the spots where we know there's a lot of fish. And from fishing those areas, it's really evident on the days when you have the right bait, because you could just go in one 200-yard stretch and move 6 fish. And then you can go down that same stretch the next day, they're still there, and move 0. And sometimes you can see the bait move around, but sometimes you see that the bait's still there. And that's when you just have to switch it up. Like Max said, you're moving rubber, you're moving fish on rubber. If they're lazy, it pretty much just boils down to you might not be working it fast enough. And with that being said, you still have to give the fish time to eat it. So quick snaps followed by a single pause and then more quick snaps is usually a good key to get those fish to eat and, find a spot in the cast to eat. I'm trying to think what else I could add for bait switch or patterning from the day before. It really has been key. I mean, like I said, we've been finding so many fish in the weeds, and these spots they're going hot and cold, but it still feels like the fish are always there. And there was one day where, I mean, I know that fish were caught on blades and everything like that, but we couldn't get them to stay off a suic and a navin. Like, they were only eating diving rice for us, and we were moving, loads of fish. And I don't know if we snapped rubber or put a glide bait on or something, or ran bucktails over, if we even saw those fish. So it's good to switch it up. If you're running solo, I suggest running spots twice and doing 2 different presentations. But those are my 2 cents on, when to switch and all that.
It just feels like this year, the person that has that hot bait on, it just feels like that they're having so much more success in the same boat as anyone else, no matter where they're at position wise in the boat. I mean, last weekend, Brian, we're, like we said, we fished Action Water on Sunday morning, and I was fishing in front of you with a bait that I have fished that body of water with countless times. Didn't move a single fish. You were right behind me. You threw on, what is that bait, Gus? Enticer, like grub spinner. And, you couldn't keep it off. You couldn't keep fish off that bait. I mean, it was just crazy. I was literally landing my bucktail, reeling it in, and you'd cast in the exact same spot and fish would come in or hit. So it just feels like right now more than ever, that bait selection and finding the right pattern is more important, than anything.
And that bait you're talking about that moved and caught some fish all that Sunday, I went out and used it that Monday and Tuesday, and between 2 days only had 1 follow. And that doesn't even come close to what happened in 2 hours with that bait on that one day.
Yeah, that's the most annoying part.
Switching baits is important, but I don't even know where I was going with that.
It's so annoying because
it's just important. You gotta not rifle through, but you do have to figure out what they're going to be eating every day. I mean, especially if the weather changes. You know, if it's the same as before, the day before, you're probably good or should feel confident about what you had luck on the day before.
So I guess to tie a bow onto this conversation or this topic would be, if you feel confident in where the fish are, you got that, checkpoint kind of taken care of. Don't get discouraged if you're not moving fish, because it might be as simple as just bait selection. I mean, it could be timing, but a lot of it too, I think, comes down to bait selection this year, which I think actually is a great segue into our next segment here. And I'm going to dip a little bit early into our Q&A, Brian. So this one just kind of brings up the whole topic of timing. So when we were fishing with Clay today, he brought up a few very interesting points about moon phases that I'm going to touch on. But his question is, and it's a big question, so I think we can kind of just choose and pick it apart a little bit on things we feel comfortable talking about. But he just asks, what are your favorite moon phases? Have you caught your PBs during certain moon phases? Why do you prefer certain moon phases? Example, moon up, moon down, rise, set, first quarter, last quarter, full, new. Which would you go to target a giant, or would you go, during any of them, whichever comes first? So I think essentially what he's asking is, do you have a favorite moon phase? Have you had success in the past with certain moon phases? Something like that.
That is all kind of hard to put in few words. I know there's some people that have been fishing all their life and they catch muskies this day, that day, or they're like, I just catch them all year. Or some people are like, I can only catch them at new moon. I can only catch them in full moon. Little things like that, that some of it could be opinionated, just, listen in with an open mind. But I guess for me, definitely going around new and full moons seem to get some pretty crazy bites, and would probably be my number one time choices to go after a big fish. But I have personally been on full moon and even new moon times where it's leading up to it and the weather absolutely sucks, and it is, in my opinion, probably not a good time to go after the biggest, really big fish. Because I mean, I remember last August, it was early August, full moon, and I was out on a guide trip, and I thought the bite was going to be pretty good. And because it's the day of the full moon, the weather was actually very bad. There was a northeast wind. It was frontal and just really crappy. A lot of sun, not many clouds, and we didn't see a single thing until sunset. And I was on a big fish waypoint, and I think with the full moon, it's the moonrise right at sunset, coinciding. Like, I'm gonna go to the big fish spot. I got this big fish waypoint. We saw like a 4-footer there this year, or last year, sorry. Did not get to lay hooks into that one, and ended up catching like a 32, 33 on the minute of the major, or minute of the minor, and that was it. Tightest bite window ever. I knew I've been fishing that lake a bunch. I knew where they all were. We're rifling through baits like we were just talking, and using some of the really big time confidence ones. And that's tough. I mean, weather trumps moon. So for the question of going back on big fish, man, if you got new moon or full moon and just like the juiciest weather in the middle of summer when the temps aren't too hot, which has kind of been what's going on right now and why we had some really good success on new moon last week, that's when to go on big fish. And if you're not on big fish or you don't get to fish very often, just go to big fish water. That's where you're going to get your best opportunities, and you're going to be on big fish water and basically have it seem like you're on action water. That's just where you're going to get your best opportunities. And I know today we had a little discussion with Clayton and Nick, Max and I, on moon up and moon down, kind of referring to when the moon is overhead or after it rises, as opposed to when it sets. and when it is underfoot. And Clayton has found, and he has fished up here a lot longer than all of us, and he kind of has the idea that once the moon is up, the bite might not be as good, which is why a lot of people like to night fish on new moon, because the moon is down. It sets at sunset and it's underfoot in the middle of the night. So a lot of people have really good success during that major in the middle of the night. And he was kind of saying how when the moon rises, he likes the minor, time leading up to it. And once it's up in the air, above us and all that stuff, it's tougher, maybe tighter bite windows. And that's kind of what we saw today. It was a combination of moon up, frontal, and there was a period today where we were fishing. I mean, I don't want to say this with too much confidence, but we were on top of fish. I mean, we've already been fishing this lake. We've been moving fish in these areas. We're fishing over waypoints, and we weren't seeing a thing when there was nothing going on environmentally. There was no moon going on. So, oh man, I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'm just rambling, but I guess actually what I'd like to almost hear, maybe if you guys want to message either myself or our Instagram page, Muskies on Tap, is, when do you find some of your most success underfoot or overhead, when the moon's up or the moon down? If you have any opinion on that, we'd actually really like to hear that, because that's just been a really interesting topic.
Yeah, I think to go off of what Clayton was saying, that was kind of mind blowing for me is, when the moon is rising during that minor, typically we'll fish on the first half hour. We kind of, quantify that minor as the half hour prior to moon going up, and the half hour moon, is already up. So, say moonrise is at 10 a.m. or whatever. We kind of quantify that minor as 9:30 to 10:30, and peak is 10 a.m. Today he was, well, no, I mean, it's an hour before and a few minutes after. And I was like, interesting. So it's not 30 and 30. It's almost like you're trying to fish hard that hour prior to moon coming up. And then once it comes up, he, feels that bite, like Gus said, gets either more difficult or those windows get tighter. And I just found that very interesting, as, we kind of just go off of the Solunar tables, app or whatever. If you guys don't have that, it's worth checking out to know when those moon times are.
A website.
Yeah, website. Sorry, yeah, so Lunar Forecast, I think it's called. But that was kind of one of those interesting things where I'm like, okay, that's a whole new way of looking at those minor periods, where instead of focusing on, that, say, call it again, 10 a.m. is when moon rises, instead of saying, well, that's peak, no, that's actually, closer to the end. And you want to get back on those good spots an hour before instead of just a half hour before. All right. So, Brian, as a lot of people know you by, I mean, you're quite the astronomer yourself. So, what do you feel as far as the moon windows and that all goes?
Now I'm a big fan of new moon. As I caught that nice fish last weekend. I don't know if you guys saw it. Go check out the Instagram. But
Jeez.
no, I mean,
Plug.
shameless plug. I don't know if I have quite enough experience to develop a pattern over favorites of full moon, new moon. I think we had like a rough go at a full moon last year, if I remember. But, then again, who knows what the main factor was with that weekend. But I don't know. Definitely not someone to go off, years of experience on different types of moons. But I mean, this year, obviously, major periods have dominated. I think we've had a ton of eats right around peak major. So yeah, I mean, hammering those times. Minors have been like fairly underwhelming this year. I think like a couple of years ago, minors, kind of competed with majors. We seem to always get action during them, but this year's been very major driven.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And that is definitely always important on a day-to-day basis. I don't know if anybody follows or who does follow Jeff Van Remortel, and he's big on incoming wind in the morning. And we have definitely seen some pretty sweet bites and good eats happening in that like late morning time if there's a minor or specifically major that happens when there's a wind pickup. or even a wind shift. The environmental changes are really important, and that's something to key in on how you get your bites outside of moon windows, because if there's no moon and there's nothing environmentally changing, that's when it's tough. And that's when I would say you have to kind of just realize that it's tough. Don't get down bad like, oh, I just went through my best spot, best bait, didn't see a fish, but it's high bright sun, the wind hasn't even changed a bit, and there's no moon. You just can't be too hard on yourself. I think we've touched on moon quite a bit there. I hope we got through some of the questions that Clayton had for us. I know he kind of gave us a doozy there, but I think we had a good little segment there on moon. So I think we're going to transition here to a couple Q&A questions to close out today's podcast.
Okay, well, this segment of Q&A, real quick before we dive into it, I just want to say I've been thoroughly enjoying all those that have reached out on the Muskies on Tap Instagram thing, even just to comment and whatever on stories and chat. Always happy to do that. I think we got some sickos following us because the few stories today of losing fish. Got a lot of comments of people either saying, yeah, same, it's just been one of those years and stuff like that. So I don't know if fish have been eating a little bit weird this year or what, but it's kind of cool to share the pain with some people. I think this episode started out as a nice little therapy session for all of us. So yeah, hopefully it is a little bit relatable to some people that are listening. But yeah, let's dive into this Q&A. So first question from Ben: will my eyes ever be graced with any YouTube content from Muskies on Tap / Sugs Fishing? Ben, that is a fantastic question. Unfortunately, I'm not able to answer that, but I will say there is a lot of great content in the hopper. Gus, I'm going to turn this one over to you. Will there ever be any YouTube content from Muskies on Tap / Sugs Fishing?
I'm excited for this one. Good question, Ben.
Well, that's been in the works for quite some time here. I've been kind of working on my team here. They've been, trying to just get the footage. I've been talking with them every single day, and they just can't seem to get anything going. Yeah, Ben, I am a really bad editor. I need to learn and probably take some classes. Busy in the summer. I had the idea of putting out YouTube videos this summer, and then summer hit, fishing hit, and I'm like, I barely have had time to upload footage. So I am going to say that I'm going to really strive and try really hard this winter to put out content. The absolute bare minimum is put out a bunch of YouTube, or not, like maybe YouTube shorts, if I make a page, but just like the shorts on cool eats, catches on Instagram and Facebook. That's definitely the goal. And I want the people out there to, kind of see some of the catches. We don't want to make them like a super long thing or anything and get mega educational. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing here on the podcast, is trying to bring a little education here and there for sure for the listeners. You don't want to just hear a bunch of idiots riff about nothing. We got to at least have some driving points here and there. But the videos we've been doing for fun, we've been dabbling with potentially doing like actual YouTube videos, and that's just been kind of tough. There's a few of those people out there that do it, and they do it really well, and we always enjoy watching them. But I think one thing for sure that people don't see behind the scenes, and I know some of them kind of talk about it, and really the people that are really good at it don't talk about it at all, which is, props to them, is just the amount of time and effort that they put into it. And there's probably some people out there that don't appreciate them, because I mean, I really appreciate like what those people do and putting those YouTube videos out on musky fishing. Because I mean, you think about it, they put out a video that might be 10 minutes long, and you're like, well, that's the total of them fishing for a day and a half just for a 10-minute video or something like that. That's when it gets really tough. But that's a whole nother rabbit hole on like, 10-minute video or maybe a 5-minute video. You see them catch a fish, they talk about it, video's done. It's like, well, did you see the part about maybe them getting 2 follows in 8 hours? Just like the hard parts of musky fishing. So really just filming musky is difficult, but there is a good media of fish catches that we have in the vault, and I would like to share that with the public. YouTube, it definitely could be a thing, but I don't want to make too many promises, but I definitely want to get some more footage out to you guys starting in the fall when things slow down, but winter for sure.
Well, Muskies on Tap Instagram stories will always be bringing that fire, but I hope to do a little bit better by you guys than just taking videos of the laptop recordings. We've been kind of dabbling with that, and it's always fun just like that night to be like, yeah, okay, we caught a fish. Here's kind of how it went down. I mean, I just had one this weekend of a really cool eat that I had in the 8. And that was on Friday night, so that was fun. But yeah, we'll be trying to continue to keep those up on weekends we're fishing. But yeah, looking forward to Gus editing some of those clips. We got a lot of fun content, and ideally, like one day it'd be really fun to actually get good at it and make 10, 15 minute, 20-minute videos of like these big weekends we do, because I feel like we could fill up some good content. I think it would be enjoyable to watch, but I don't know. Who knows? Okay, second question from our guy Owen with Big O's Bucktails.
Owen.
Shout out him from the Musky Hunks. That's our guy.
Shout out Owen.
Our boy. Go check out Big O's Bucktails. He makes some awesome stuff. We've been in cahoots. Sounds like he's gonna ship some over here to Wisconsin. So I'm excited to see how those Wisconsin fish react to some Big O's.
I need a Big O hoodie. We need to get the hoodie plug from him.
I know. Yeah, that'd be sick. Yeah, we were already plugging Tom's Saddle Tramp merch, which is like top tier. I need to get my hands on some stuff. Gus already has a shirt, but yeah, I need to get one of those. Speaking of merch, we do got some stuff in the works for Muskies on Tap. So
stay tuned for that.
Yeah,
just like the YouTube videos, it's in the works.
Yeah, we're the fact that we've even started this podcast and have now been on episode 13 is a goddamn win in itself. Yeah, we're gonna try to do some merch. We would like to make some sweatshirts or some shirts or whatever. So if you guys want one, just know that they are coming, and reach out and be like, hey, yeah, I would love a t-shirt or love a sweatshirt or something like that. And we'll try to get something done up, because we're looking honestly for a little, well, should say this. We're looking for a nudge, but we've tasked Brian with head of merchandise for Muskies on Tap. Things have been moving a little bit slowly. He's not hitting the deadlines, but
we were close, guys. We had the prototypes drawn up. Prototypes we were about to be released.
I think things are going to happen. Big things are happening soon. Got all the confidence in the world in Brian to accomplish this task.
There's going to be no price on these. You guys come into our Muskies on Tap comments, name your price. We'll tell you if you're paying high enough for it or not.
All right. His question from Owen. Night fishing, color selection, black, orange, or it doesn't matter, it's dark, you dumbass. Brian, thoughts?
Doesn't matter, it's dark, you dumbass. You're throwing top anyway. That'd be my quick answer.
It's facts.
We were just talking about this with topwater. Like, I don't think topwater color matters. I think as long as it's like a dark base color, like a blue, brown, black, green, purple, it's all kind of the same at night. But yeah, underwater at night, I tend to think that it's more based off of the sound and the vibrations your bait's putting out, which is why, blades or like double tens, like everybody kind of starts to think of some loud, obnoxious blades under there to call the fish in. And that's kind of more what I care about rather than color at night. But yeah, I don't know. I guess for some reason I tend to think darker at night, and I usually like flashy baits. So that's just my 2 cents there. Gus, you got any science behind the methods?
I was literally just going to talk about sound for underneath the water. I was going to say that's got to trump color for sure. I was gonna say dumb theory about top water that maybe like white top waters weren't selling well. So some people out there were like, yeah, white works too. I don't know. That could be a thing. Probably not, but probably is. Um, I don't know about color. I mean, we did have some luck on darker top water and darker blades at night, but that probably amounted to the fact that that's all we threw. I don't think anyone threw anything white or chartreuse or anything like that. I guess there's actually two things that I was going to add about night fishing and the little bit I actually dabbled in last year for Max and I too. Really, we got some hits unsuccessful. One was an absolute heartbreak. I don't know if I can get into it again just because of how bad it was, but dive and rise was actually quite good at night, and something that if you're working 3 people and you got one top water, one blade, probably good to throw that change up in the back. And another thing that I do want to kind of get into, which I heard about, is some jointed crankbaits making a little noise, just like we're talking about with bucktails. You get a double 10, you get a trigger, you get some offset blade combo like any of the frenzies or just anybody that makes something where it's not double this, it's a 7-9, 8-9, 10-9, 10-11. I don't even know if they make 11s, but you know what I mean there. But getting like a jointed crankbait out there, I feel like that when I've heard about that, I feel like that could be quite deadly. So that's something. I know Owen's question was about color, and I think I agree with Brian. It's dark, you dumbass. So any color works. I don't know if you got anything else to add there, Max.
I listened to a podcast. I think it was Backlash with Pete Mena. He was talking about it. He was
Shout
saying
out,
how
Pete.
typically, what's up?
Shout out, Pete.
Yeah, shout out. I think typically the common feeling towards color at night is darker the better. Not I guess
I just do that during the day too.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of darker colors just in general, but I think during the night. But he was also saying he's like, I had clients that would catch fish on chartreuse bucktails at night, and it's like you're not supposed to do that. So I do think that it's more based on sound and presentation than actual. I guess presentation is probably color, but it's more based on that sound, that vibration, what that bait's doing, the action, not as much so based on color. All right, let's dive into the last. Oh, you want to go ahead?
Well, I
more?
just
Yeah,
want
go
to
ahead.
say
Hit it.
how it's still musky fishing and it's super weird because I've been with Gus on numerous occasions when we fish kind of last light, like it's almost pitch black out, and he's gotten pounded on a suic, which is pretty damn silent. It pushes a quarter of the water as a blade.
Just the clacking of the hooks, really.
Yeah. So it's all a big mystery. Throw it, you're confident, but yeah, like they were saying, err on the side of sound, bring him in with the vibrations. But sorry to cut you off, Max. Max, go ahead and introduce our next questionnaire here.
Okay, our next question comes from our guy Wyatt. Wyatt asks, you guys talk a lot about using Red October tubes. Shout out Red October tubes. Is there a preference on using those over other types of rubber like a Medusa or a Bulldog? Or is there a time and place to tossing one over the other? That's a great question, and I think pretty spot on to today.
That is very true because when Max is getting the action on the silent rubber, which I would categorize with like a Toad, a Bulldog, a Medusa, I think like a Lake X B2, all those that don't involve, I say that because I typically add trailer blades to my tubes. But something that kind of falls silently and just pushes the water. With the tubes, today Max is getting a lot of action on the Bulldogs and Medusas. I actually popped a tube quite a bit today, and I didn't visually see anything. And I think one time I had a late follow on side image that I never got to visually see. They were snapping on rubber today. That was evident. Nothing on blades. We found that out after just 1 to 2 people throwing blades the whole day. And even a tube didn't work. I mean, there was a point where tubes, they would hit that thing in the first 5 snaps, and that is what they were hitting. That seemed to be earlier in the year. That was actually working really well in June for getting some of our bigger bites during June when it was even hard to you know, entice them to eat. But I I am still going to use tubes throughout the summer, but I have a feeling they're going to make a comeback in late August during a little bit of cool downs, times when lakes bloom up a little bit going into September as well, where when you're working them really shallow, you have the trailer blades or some sort of blade attachment to help them find the bait and pop them over very shallow cover. And that's when kind of saw them shine last year. That would be kind of more like a time of year thing. Not saying that they will not work here in the middle of summer. Was able to pop a tube fish last week and miss a few actually this past week, along with many of the heartbreaks. A lot of the heartbreaks kind of were on rubber, which is unfortunate. You know, one on blades, but a lot on rubber.
Well, I guess I think this actually opens up a whole other bag here. I know as I typically do on Q&A, but what do you guys think is like different between, you know, throwing a tube and throwing a Medusa, or throwing a tube and throwing a bulldog? So, I mean, I don't know if there's an exact science behind it, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
I think generally if you're throwing the tube without any sort of blade customization going on with it, just a tube in its raw form, and then a bulldog, I would venture to say that the tube is a lot more erratic. You're kind of getting more of like the side to side glide baity action. I would say maybe for hotter fish and fish that want something a little bit quicker, maybe. And then a lot of your bulldogs can also be erratic, depending, you know, every bulldog's made different. Sometimes you get one that bounces side to side, sometimes they're just up and down. But yeah, I mean, I think the bulldog you can tend to keep a little bit shallower, or, you know, pop it over the weeds a little bit easier. The tubes without a blade can dive super quick. So I mean, you'd have to be a freak athlete to be ripping that consecutive cast over shallow weeds. But I don't know. I've always liked the bulldog. I'm used to using it. I have not used the tubes as much as you guys have had, so you guys can speak more on that. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, with the old bulldog, the action wise. And one thing I would add for Medusas, which I do really like, and I know so many people really, really like, is that I got a tough time with the larger Medusas because I absolutely love mid Medusas. And that's because they almost work like you can work a bulldog in a tube. And I feel like that's just why we like throwing typically bulldogs and tubes more often, is because they get some pretty crazy erratic side to side. I mean, if you get a standard hardness bulldog, you can bend that nose down, hop that thing along, and if you get that thing tuned right, that thing will walk left, walk right, go up, down, left, right, and then, you know, same with tubes. You'll watch them walk back and forth. And with mid Medusas, you can get those things bent right, and you can get them to walk side to side. And I think that's key. You know, I have personally not caught a fish on a husky Dusa. Granted, I don't use that size of Medusas very often. And I feel like I'm just not getting the action that I want out of the bait. I know there's some people that work the, you know, ever living crap out of them, and, you know, God bless them. But I just, you know, the triple tail there, unless you got them things boiling in water and really soft and, you know, going well on the fall, I don't think those things, you know, move around very much, you know, not as much as like a mag dog.
I was just gonna agree with you that the Husky Medusa is just like pulling in a 2x4. I used it last year one day when it was kind of a big rubber bite, and we were trying to let them sink down like at a deeper 18, 20-foot water. But like pulling it back, I mean, it just comes back straight like a submarine. I mean, you can try and hop it, but it really doesn't hop or move side to side or anything. And those tails are so long and heavy and wide. I mean, there's no doubt it pushes water, and I could see something eating it, but like it just made me want to switch back to something that's easier on the back and shoulders, and that actually kind of hops around and moves throughout the water columns a little easier. But yeah, I don't know if there's any way you could even mess with the harness or tune it to hop. I mean, feels like you need a 10-foot XXX heavy rod to get it to bounce at all.
Yeah, probably. I know there's one thing that I found on the internet or just through people's videos and stuff like that. I didn't obviously invent this, but if you haven't boiled your rubber to get them to fall a little bit better and get the tails to flutter a little bit more, I'd highly recommend. The only thing that I did wrong the first time I did it is just don't boil it too long. I would always just err on the side of not putting it in there for very long, try a couple seconds, take it out, cool it off, and then just kind of stretch it and just see how it feels. If it got softer, I mean, you got the goal is had, you got that. And that's just something that I know people have kind of done with their Medusas because they actually just come so stiff. Like you're saying, pulling in a 2x4. What does a 2x4 probably do in the water? Doesn't really move around very much. It just goes in a straight line. And that's not what you want out of your baits. I mean, when I say that I like suics and I get a lot of bites on suics, it's from the suics that walk. I mean, I don't see very many times a fish hitting a suic where it's just going down, up, down, up. I mean, that thing's darting left, darting right, popping up, blowing out of the water. Like, who cares? Like, if it's suics in the water, it's doing its job already. So maybe boiling your rubber, or maybe I need to boil the husky deuces more. Maybe I just didn't do those enough, and maybe we can get some walk out of them. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud on that one for myself, just because it might be something we need to do because we are getting some big bites on big rubber, and there's a chance we might need to go bigger.
I think you try and boil that husky Medusa, but hey, if that doesn't work and that thing's still just coming in like a plank of wood, I think we cut that top middle tail off and try and make a little cussy double dog out of it.
Now you're thinking. Our friends in over in Hayward in Minnesota are probably shaking their heads right now listening to this.
Yeah.
I know that they throw a lot of husky Medusas and it works out pretty damn well for them. But yeah, we're sitting over here in Vilas County, and baits run a little bit smaller over here, I think. Just in general, and who we talking probably on this podcast, not only our friends in maybe Hayward, but definitely Minnesota shaking their heads about, we're talking about big fish and we're freaking out about 45s, and things are a little bit different here. 45, 46-inch fish here it's a big deal. It really is. And I think anyone that listens to this and this neck of the woods would probably agree with that. I'd hope so, unless they're doing something and I'd like to talk to them. If they're consistently catching fish that big. But yeah, it's just a little bit different of a ball game. So that I will say that I want to make sure it's clear that this is very tailored towards kind of this area of northern Wisconsin and Vilas County, just because I do, I've seen the videos, I've listened to other podcasts, and those big baits work. I would like to throw that husky deuce more, because I do feel like, especially after today, getting some confidence throwing that bigger, for us, regular size Medusa, and seeing those fish move, I could see where, you would be able to get some bigger bites and some bigger fish to move on that husky size Deusa. But all right, well, great Q&A there, fellas. As usual, we kind of gone off on a few different tangents. So hope everyone found this podcast, good. It was a little bit of riff off the cuff. We didn't have any guests or exciting trips to kind of debrief on, so it was a little bit more technical this week. So hopefully you picked up at least one or two tricks. Brian, I know you got to wake up early, probably get in the surgery room and save some people's shoulders tomorrow morning. You got anything to end the pod with? When are we going to see you next? What's your next move going to be? Are you going to stick around in Green Bay? You moving to Appleton? What's the deal?
Yeah, life update. I'll be in Green Bay for another month, and then I'm heading most likely, if we get this place we were looking at, down towards the Kaukauna area. I've heard from a little birdie that there's a little spot in Kaukauna there on the Fox River. loaded with muskies. So if we do move there, I'm going to be shore fishing a little bit more, taking some tips out of our buddy Parker's playbook and trying my luck that way. But yeah, I'll be with Gus next weekend. We'll be taking the weekend off of fishing, probably his first weekend without fishing since the ice was on the lakes. But yeah, we'll be slugging back a few bushes and chopping it up with the fellas for the weekend, and probably much needed break from fishing for Gus.
Yeah, you guys are really going to be leaning into the on tap portion of the podcast. Not much muskies, more taps.
Next week's pod will be strictly about beer, guys. No fishing.
What are the top five craziest nights you've had?
How hard have you partied?
All right, Gus, what do you got on the agenda this week before you do take the weekend off?
This week, I have a couple of guy trips that I'm really looking forward to. This is actually some repeat clients from last year, and we had a blast last year, and I'm really looking forward to it again this year. Max is joining in for Monday Night Musky League. He is going to be subbing for our father, and we are really looking forward to that. We had some really good luck last year that hopefully we can repeat like we did. And then I also have Tuesday Night League with a good buddy, Clayton Speece. Hopefully we can keep the ball rolling. Monday night we've been struggling. Had that very good opener for myself, and then the team has gotten a few, and then it's just been quite slow for us. We've been hit with some pretty tough weather. There hasn't been a whole mess of fish caught yet on some of the nights. Some of the nights, if they come in with a whole pile of fish and you didn't, that's when you feel really terrible. But really recently it's been tough bites. But Tuesday Night League, Clayton and I are doing pretty well. Our team is sitting at the top place right now. I don't even think we touched on it, but Clayton and I actually last week had a 5-fish night, totaled for a 7-fish day, which that was an absolute banger. We had 4 registerable fish. Clayton caught 3, 2 that were registered, and I caught 2 myself. And then Clayton also missed another. So we had a lot of opportunities in about 4.5 hours. And that was that day I was talking about where it felt like you could probably get them on some other things, but man, we could only get them going on Navins and Suiks. Dive and Rise was the ticket. But anyways, those are the things I'm looking forward to. Brian talked about, I'm going to be seeing him this weekend. We're going to be having a little fun, taking some time off musky fishing. So hopefully we can have something to talk about next week. I know this week, I really hope you guys enjoyed some of the fundamentals. Honestly, I enjoyed it a lot myself looking back because, man, I mean, it's good to do that because I didn't want to just sit here with all these heartbreaks. I don't think any of us did. At least you got to learn from them, and I think that's really important. And I hope everybody else learned from our heartbreaks. And next week we'll have something up for you guys, a little more than just on tap. We'll have some musky talk for sure. I'm going to quick look at the weather ahead for you guys. This isn't exactly like a super early recording, but this is a little bit before it's coming out this Thursday. And honestly, the water temps have been hovering at that 70 to 72. I mean, there's a few lakes that are under that I've heard, and there's a few lakes that were hitting 73, but honestly, I've been sticking to a little bit more of the medium to large water lately, and that's where we've been really getting our big bites. And I could see that still happening because we were getting some hot weather, and some of those small lakes have a chance of getting too hot. So just please be conscious of your water temps. I'm not going to tell people when and where and what they can fish. That's a load of crap if you do that. But anyways, we're going to be getting 80s, and potentially 90 before the weekend. And then we're going to get some, at least the weather says, some rain, and it might cool off a little bit. Luckily, we have nighttime temps in the 60s and still the upper 50s. This is where I expect this rubber bite that we saw today to only get better. I would assume we're going to get some pretty big wind. Oh, no, nothing terrible, but I would just keep your mag dogs at hand and rip those. I mean, I just gonna tell it to you guys straight. We've been seeing crap loads and crap loads of fish on weed edges. And if you move a fish, hit that spot again and hit it often, because we're seeing packs of them. And that's been pretty much the name of the game. I mean, we're not, piss pounding a tiny area. I mean, we're working very, very, very large areas, since we're working on, fishing some larger lakes, but you just got to fish the areas often, because there's always going to be more fish there. And if they're holding fish and bait, oftentimes we refer to those spots as reloading spots. Fish move on and off that all day long, probably on the daily basis is what we're thinking. And I think that's come true, because I mean, we've moved definitely different fish that look different, or move different fish after catching fish on the same spot. So just look for that. Look for the rubber bite to heat up. Water temps are going to spike. The blades are still going to be probably active. Don't be afraid to pull out the double tens. Don't be afraid to go big. And I wish everyone the best of luck this week, and really look forward to the next podcast. And quick, before we send it away, I'll just do the quick plug for Instagrams. If it would be awesome if you guys could follow our Instagram page, Muskies on Tap. I also have one myself, Suggs Fishing. Also on Facebook, it's my personal account, Gus Manti, and my guide service page, Suggs Fishing Guide Service. You can also reach me at my cell phone number, which is 920-264-3816. We'd love to hear from you guys. And I think that's it. You got anything else to say, Max?
Yeah, I'm excited to get back in the saddle for Monday Night Muskie League. Gus and I had a few really good league nights last summer when I was able to stick around for Mondays and fish that with him. So excited to get the competitive juices flowing again. It's been a while since Madison PMTT, so excited to kind of just get back and do some competitive fishing. It's always just a fun element that, we've touched on in the past, but it's just a good time, makes those fish a little bit more special. So hopefully that goes well. We'll be touching on that, I'm sure, the next pod. So we'll see how that goes. And we got Vermilion PMTT here in a handful of weeks. So I think we're just starting to gear up and get excited for that. Other than that, I think it's going to be a quiet few weeks on the fishing front for me up until Vermilion. So got a lot of really good fishing in the month of July. Really cherished all the opportunities that we had. So a lot of fun. I'm sure the bite will continue to be good for Gus here and for the rest of you guys too that are going to be able to get out over the next few weeks. So wish everyone the best of luck. Again, can't reiterate enough. Love chatting it up with you guys on the Muskie on Tap page. That's a lot of fun. That's been cool to see the followers start to accumulate on that and interacting with people. So it's cool. Big reason why we wanted to start this is to kind of interact with the Muskie community as a whole. So definitely going to stay true to that and have been enjoying it. So Brian, without further ado, you want to take us away and send us off into the weekend here?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening all the way into the end. You are one of our super fans if you got this far into the podcast. We are going to be taking a brief break this weekend, slugging back some brews, nipping some wedges out on the golf course, and going back to our other point about being sad about losing fish, guys. It's not the player, it's the equipment. Go buy a new rod, maybe a new boat, and your luck will turn around, guys. Have a great weekend.
That was awesome.
Buy a new boat.
Get a new rod, buy a new boat.
Cheers.